No.
Read a multitask here.
So we're going to wait and see if anybody hops on here. And then I want to talk about a few things going into the new year. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and that your time was spent with family and friends. We're both kind of multitasking. So, this video will be available later on YouTube, even if you can't catch it, the whole thing right now. But I wanted to talk about goal setting going into the new year.
Yeah, New Year's resolutions are kind of popular. I don't know that we always do those, and yet it is good to set goals, I think. And
it's not just
to reevaluate yourself.
Well, I think specifically, on the homestead, you have to make a list of your goals specifically in order from, the most important to the least important. Because you can become distracted with a lot of things. And so I think goal setting is, you need to sit down, and even if you don't have a homestead or anything the like, I think it's really important to sit down and to come up with what you want to do with the new year. And so I think specifically, I think people need to become more self-reliant. They need to work on, I'm going to go over a couple of, lost skills that we have actually implemented in our homeschool.
I think a good way that I've heard this put before is not so much goal setting, but vision casting.
Right.
What's the difference between those is not saying, oh, here are things I want to do that we don't ever get to do. I feel like we always set goals with our schedule, that knowing we won't accomplish all those things within the week.
Right.
But then there's a difference whenever we say, by the end of the week, here is what I want things to be, what to look like. This is what must be accomplished. And so it's really a going forward in time and looking back and saying, what do I want to see? So what do we want to make sure that gets done?
Well, not that gets done, but has to be done.
Yeah,
I think number one on our list,
absolutely,
is the greenhouse. That's probably one of the things we will have. That will be
So we've got repairs
on the top of the list.
We've got repairs. So we've learned. We homestead, but we've built a greenhouse. A design. I had some recycled materials that were. So I designed it, and it didn't function quite well. We modified our design, and then we realized, the high tunnel, with our level of trees, nuts, and everything else, we really suffer some damages up here on our hill, and so we're going to move to a different design still yet, which will all but it'll essentially entirely wipe out my initial design. So I think it would work in other applications, but. We're growing and learning. That's all part of it.
Right.
So it's all, it's good.
Well, and I think it's preparing that, that plan A or B or C may not work.
Oh, and yeah. So, people say, oh, things go bad, here's what I'm going to do. And be like, oh, man, it takes so many years to you got to be doing this stuff because you're going to fail. And you got to learn how to fail well.
Right. Well, and not only that, I think it's important to have those around you who can kind of brainstorm with you and to toss ideas off of to see, because I found
learn from one another.
Right, I found that two minds are better than one, sort of thing. So, and I think for the new year, again, goal setting is always a big thing on my list. What do we need to accomplish in the new year? And like Vance said, I think it's important to give ourselves grace, that we don't look at it as tasks to complete, but rather, something that will put our minds fully on instead of just, a checklist of things.
Yeah, what do we want to accomplish? What must be done? What do we want life to look like?
So that is number one, is sitting down and creating a goals that you want to look at for the new year. Another one that I think is going to be really important this year, and when I have, and I don't want to call it conviction, but I've been, it's weighed heavily on my mind that as far as our family, I need to be planting seeds, like more variety, more areas, and I feel like that is going to be a focus for me this spring. That, I've got my little, I call it a kitchen garden behind my house, but I'm going to be actually utilizing some other places on my property for, I'm thinking about having, three or four more gardens, up here, just to see what grows well in what area.
What we've learned, just so you all understand the dynamics of what's going on and why it's so important to think through these things. So we have what we call a kitchen garden. It's right out back, and we can literally walk out of the kitchen and go pick fresh vegetables to bring them in and to prepare them. And but we're constantly, that was built over a clay spoil pile, so we're constantly having to build that soil. Yeah. That soil,
every
could
year.
Just plan. We always have
every
to
year.
build that with the compost and manure and what we do. So that sometimes we don't get that right, what we've used, or if there's fill involved, and then there's different soil types. We're heavy in sandstone, so we don't necessarily deal with a lot of like root rot that some people will. We will see issues with wet weather like anyone else, but we also have a serious problem with our soil leaching nutrients, and so that's a constant struggle. So finding those areas that where things do well, or learning what we can get to grow where most things don't do well, learning to make our garden not just a big ominous task that's large and needs to be commercial and row cropped. We can make it like our landscaping. There's places where we got beautiful herbs that are medicinal, but they look pretty, and they stand here by themselves next to this little thing, that we've got out there for looks. And so our landscaping, our greenery, you've done a great job at making it just beautiful but functional. So
right. And so, I want to emphasize on that, and the great thing about gardening, and if you can't garden, if you don't have the area to do that, find a friend that has the area. Last year, up here, I've discovered watermelon does not do well. Cantaloupe doesn't do well. And I don't really have the space in my little garden to grow a lot of those things. But I have a friend that's offered me a small spot on her farm to grow some butternut squash. And so I've got my pantry, I've got bukus of butternut squash because she offered me a small plot on her property. There are people that will help you out. If you want to plant a garden and they've got space, as long as you're coming to tend it and take care of it, that is always an option if you don't have the space at home to do it.
Yeah, and I think this goes a long way. You shouldn't forget, I don't know if you've ever been a part of a community garden before, but a lot of times you struggle to get people to show up. Boy, they'll take the green beans if you pick them, but they don't often come to the garden to pick them themselves. Don't hesitate. We did it well with your dad. He invites us up, and we go and we help and we pick, and we get the increase. We get benefit. And he's more than happy to do that with and for us. And
your parents too.
And my parents. So we all grow our own gardens, but we do help. But don't forget the impact that this has on community. Like you have an opportunity to build relationships with these people by working beside them. That's a huge dynamic that you can't overlook.
And one of my goals, if we get my greenhouse functioning, Well, in time,
When?
because I want
When?
when. Yeah. I do want to have like seed classes. You know how to start your seeds, repotting and things like that. And I want to. My goal is education. Is always educating. Not even not just adults but kids. You know, when we get our kids involved with growing food, it's absolutely amazing. Just the self-confidence that it builds within them to see something that they planted, that it grew and flourished, and then they have something that they can fix for supper.
Well, yeah, there's self-confidence, there's an awareness, there's an appreciation for foods maybe they wouldn't have eaten. A green pepper that you have planted and nurtured is so much sweeter than one that you have purchased from the store. That's real, but it's also because of the love that you pour into it. There's so many opportunities. I mean, my goodness, there's the death and resurrection. You know, you've got all these little sermons preached to you, as Charles Spurgeon would say, in those opportunities, those creational and learning opportunities.
And I just want to point out, you know, there's a couple of things that you can do. Again, if you don't have the property or space to do it, again, find a friend that has the space. Or if your friend grows a garden, ask if you can help out and grow some things in their garden. Another one is container gardening. There are quite a few plants that actually do really well in container gardening. You know, tomatoes, carrots, lettuce. There's always something that you can do, even if you don't have the space for a large garden. And another one that I find really interesting, and I want to do this year, and we probably need to work on moving that way, is the straw bale garden. We had friends of ours that actually did one last year, and it did phenomenal. Like it
seemed very, very economic, and
and if you don't have the equipment to till,
yeah,
if you don't have the space, if you don't have the time to upkeep and weed out,
the message I'm hearing is that essentially anyone can garden, you know.
Yeah, right. Anybody can garden.
Yeah, Bob Ross said anyone can paint. We're telling you anyone can garden. You can purchase a straw bale, flip it up on its side so that the water can go through it. It will hold water for you.
Saturate.
And so you want it to saturate. You want it wet. Let it sit in the rain, everything. You know, like those old bales that people use for decorations are great. You can hollow it out and add a little soil. Get you some topsoil or something. It's fine, and then grow. But it will sustain. It'll grow wonderful. And then you can put stakes in the ground and run strings. You can do any number of things that you see fit. And just learn from. But it's a really, really cool idea. Yeah. The straw bale gardens, 5-gallon bucket gardenings, and those are good because with the 5-gallon buckets, they're contained in such a way it makes it super easy to implement hydroponics.
Right. Yeah.
Like if a person wanted to go into hydroponics, man, you've got all your containers there. I mean, you can get gutters. I mean, you can get as fancy as you like. It's overwhelming because it's just it becomes really fun, I think, and what you can dream up.
Well, and just experiment with and whatever. Okay, so with the gardening and the seeds, I wanted to bring up something. And so I've got my seed magazines have started to come in, and I've gone through them, but I love Fedco. I have not bought seeds from them yet. But they have some really interesting, I'll call them interesting, enlightening articles in here. And so one of the things that I want to keep an eye on, and I suggest you all keep an eye on, is okay, help me with this word. Is it monopolization? Is that a word?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, monopolization of the seed market. That is one of the biggest issues that I don't think a whole lot of people talk about. And they've got an article in here that is talking about that. And so when you buy seeds from a lot of these magazines, they are sourcing their seeds from other companies, from other families, from other areas, around the world. So the problem with doing that, and what we have seen in the past with a lot of industry, is big corporations coming in and buying up smaller family-owned companies and actually taking control and cornering the market. An example like the seed market. That's a big issue. Not only because you want a variety of people to offer these seeds, but they are now starting to patent certain seeds, which has a lot of legal ramifications for those who are buying and planting these seeds.
So that is what you see in modern commercial farming. They're dealing with patented seeds.
Right.
That's the nature of the GMO debacle.
And I want to point this out really quick. And why I'm stating this is that in the recent years, there has been a company called Syngenta, which is a chemical company. It's a chemical corporation. And between January 2019 and June 2023, the Syngenta Group acquired 7 more plant breeding and seed production companies. So this is upon what they already had. And I'm not sure if it says how many seed companies they have in total on here. So again, I'm going to emphasize on the family-owned. They are buying up family-owned companies that a lot of these seed magazines rely on for their supply of seeds. And so I think we need to keep a close eye on this. And so what I'm trying to say is don't just buy your seeds from one company. Go to several different companies. And then not only that, but go a step farther and check and see where they're buying their seeds from. But I mean, when you go to Walmart, you have to keep in mind the seeds that and I've done it before. When I've been in a place where I needed seeds, I'll go buy from Walmart or from some of these others. But keep in mind, they are owned by companies who are cornering this market, who are taking control of food essentially, and that is that's a problem.
What is the solution to that? I would say.
Well, and Fedco. So for instance, Fedco for. Good morning, Nayli. They are here in just a minute. Okay.
You will do that later, sweetheart.
They stand for. I'm trying to find where they stated this. But they want you to be able to plant whatever you want, wherever you want. They don't want any legal ties to anything. They think that you have the right to order seeds, plant them, save the seeds, plant them again, save the seeds, and plant them again. Understand, when a seed is patented and you buy it the first time, you cannot legally save the seeds for next year's planting.
That's why I would say the solution. So finding a reputable corporation to get you started is important, because they do breed these seeds. I mean, we understand, just like we breed goats, we're not like introducing hormones and junk to them, but we do keep an eye on wholesome genetics. It's why we've moved away from having simple yard chickens, so that we could preserve the genetics of our various breeds. We can still crossbreed if we choose to get a certain level of hybrid vigor, but we don't just lose that ability. We don't limit our gene pool by doing some of that, and so that's they do the same with seeds, that there are qualities that you can breed for, but there are qualities you got to be careful because you will breed out of.
And
so you can find something reputable. But what I was wanting to say is that heirloom seeds, when you get the heirloom seeds, you need to understand part of your gardening is not for the vegetables you will eat. It's for the seeds that you will save.
Well, not only that, but we have groups who are, and this is one, they pointed this out in here. So when you buy an heirloom seed, you're buying something that has been bred to withstand certain diseases, certain climate areas. And so when you're buying an heirloom seed, you're buying something that somebody has come in and has taken time to recognize certain characteristics, and in the end is creating a stronger plant. And so I wanted to talk about this real quick also, as far as the Syngenta debacle. Understand these companies that are buying these smaller seed companies up are pharmaceutical groups. So in 2000, the agricultural divisions of pharmaceutical giants Novartis, I have never heard of that one, Novartis and AstraZeneca merged to form Syngenta. Over the next 20 years, it acquired numerous seed and agrochemical producers internationally. Acquired by ChemChina in 2017 in the largest global takeover by the Chinese company, Syngenta then merged in 2020 with Israeli crop protection company ADAMA in the agricultural branch of the Sinochem to form Syngenta Group. It continued to acquire other seed and chemical companies. In 2021, ChemChina and Sinochem completed their merger as Sinochem Holdings, a wholly owned subsidiary of the state-owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commissions, run by China's State Council, a powerful body of China's executive branch. Sinochem is the world's largest agrochemical conglomerate. So, do you want China owning all your seeds? Because that's what it's getting to. Own your seeds, your seed companies, and go and so forth.
Well, I was blown away, during the pandemic that they roped off the seeds. I couldn't imagine why they would
do that.
Yeah, why they would fence off and say you're not allowed to buy seeds. We weren't talking about blights or anything else, and I just think that's a terrible thing to see happen. So the main thing is find those reputable companies and be able to do this yourself, because the solution is not even that we would be so effective that we could offer seeds to people, but that you all our neighbors would be effective, so that we would all have this store that would insulate us from blights or shortages and things like that.
Well, and understand too, I think it's a great bartering thing.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't have the space to garden, I'm going to encourage you to go out and buy seeds. Go out and buy seeds, because if they're stored properly, they will last for years. So, again, when you're buying your seeds, be careful who you're buying from. Okay. So, skill sets. So I'm going to talk about something real quick. And I was kind of aggravated and upset about this last night. I had Mama Bear coming out a little bit in me. But last week, the boys went and helped at a local handout for food. And I'm not going to. I'm not.
Which
gonna,
they do every
they do
time,
every year.
Every year this time of year, yeah.
But they made me aware of a conversation that they had with a couple of public schoolers, and this bothers me on more than one level. But when you have somebody that comes at you and tells you you're a loser because you're homeschooling, because you're a homeschooler, these kids didn't hear it. That's not something they came up on themselves. Or either, number one, hearing it from a teacher, or number two, hearing it from their parents. So, to me, that's a big issue. If you're coming to a charity and you're volunteering your kid out, have you really taught them anything if they're going to berate, bully, talk down to, that's on a whole nother level, I think, than just simply, the physical means of charity.
Yeah. Well, I would just say, there is a tendency to compare apples to apples. In these sort of conversations, there's a tendency to say in a test, tell me what you know, or tell me, spit out a math problem, what is 7 times 8 or something. But, and you don't really get into a lot of that. We do follow a lot of interests. We certainly have been subjected to a number of languages in our homeschooling and a number of cultures and conversations. But what come to my mind in hearing that was, it is obvious that they'd been taught that, but and I don't know what the basic concept is, but I would just ask. We've talked about homeschooling. I do think it's very important. I think that it's important enough that I do think it's the best decision for everyone. I say that, just like I say everyone can garden, I say everyone can homeschool. But the question is, if you're a parent, what if you're one of these people that watches this video and you say, man, well, when they get on the homeschool kick, you can tune out, or we're sound like a broken record, and maybe you're one of these people that's on the fence about it. Maybe you've thought, well, I wish I could. What is it about homeschool? And I would just ask, is this something that you teach your children? We see this. We see people propagate, be kind, things like that. But what is the criteria that you give your children for what gives other children value? Do you educate your child to say, you're a loser, you spend your days learning applied math on the farm, you get out of school by lunchtime if you're diligent in your work, that you have responsibility to wake up and do chores before you can begin your school? Do you train your children to call other children losers like that? Now, I hope that you're not, and I'm going to assume that you're not. If you're watching our video, it's because we have certain likeness and we value certain customs and values in our community. So I'm assuming that you're not. But if you're one of these people who still maybe put your children in these places where they are being taught that, would you condone that sort of behavior? And so that's something that it raises some red flags. And I really don't know. I don't know if it's that important for my child to wear a jersey, or for my child to have friends that won't last, that won't help him in the garden, that I would abandon, that I would say it's okay for my child to hear those things. Now, I understand.
Well, and I think we're blessed with children because that meet things like this head on, and instead of retaliating, they're saying, oh well, they recognize that they're not worth being around. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like
they
their
just
company.
distance it. It was something that they acknowledged. This was annoying to them. They didn't like being name called and things like this. And it is, what's heartbreaking is our children, we've got a history. They've served in food pantries. They've served at this event every year. So they build relationships. If our children don't show up, someone calls it from that community and says, hey, where are the boys? Is everything okay? Because they've got a relationship with adults and people in the community, and they have friends. and they volunteer, and then so they have someone come in and do that, and that's disheartening. They shouldn't have to deal with that, and but it does. It raises
I'm
questions.
not surprised.
Raises questions for what then. How then are we patterning our community? And if you're a parent, surely you don't stand for that. But the issue then is, why then do you stand for that which does propagate this in the children of our community? I mean, these are parents evidently that care. They care. They're sending their child to go and help give away. They're trying to instill values in them, and then they're sending them to a place that is fully accustomed to stereotype and demean others.
Yeah. And I'm saying that because, I think, again, there's a lot of misconceptions about homeschoolers and what we do in the home. And so I wanted to touch on something real quick. And we've been, as a homeschool family, we've been touching on some of the lost skills. And I call them lost because they are not commonly taught anymore. It's not common knowledge. We've got kids that think that brown cows make chocolate milk. They don't know about the development of a chick and an egg. They don't know where their food comes from. And I mean, I could go on with the examples of just the lack of knowledge in our culture, and it's really sad. But there's a list right here that I'm going to go through, and I think it's important to touch on these things with your children. And if you haven't thought about homeschooling, Christmas break is a great time to pull them out. But what I want to, even if your child goes to public school, I want you to emphasize on these skills, because these are very important skill sets that should be taught in the home. And quite frankly, I think parents rely on the school system to teach some of these things. And growing up in the school system, I realized real quick we didn't learn half of these things.
I would say none of them in a meaningful way. There's a difference between, for instance, I see, and don't mean to jump ahead or take too much, but carpentry or something. Yes, I realize there are classes, there's home ec classes and things like that, but there's an entire difference, to understand. See, there's no connection. They'll go have a project. It's almost like recess, and yeah, you can do this, hammer a nail and screw two boards together. But there's no connection between when you're going over here to algebra or to geometry.
But what is the end goal?
Right.
What is the end goal? Is getting a good grade, right? It's not. And understand and I think it's the same thing about getting a degree. Just because you get that grade and you pass, it doesn't mean that you are fluent or a professional in any of these. Right?
Yep.
And so we have to change the mindset. What is our goal when we're teaching these skills? And so I'm going to go through this list right here. We've got personal finances. I guarantee this year and the upcoming year is going to bring a lot of challenges for a lot of people because they have put themselves into financial stress. We have a generation of kids who are handed a credit card and they can't control their spending. We've got people who, and I feel like God has blessed us in the area of where, we've asked for wisdom and direction in certain things, and that has helped us in the end. But we've got on here is personal finances, goal setting, time management, cooking, baking, first aid, emergency preparedness, mending and sewing, planting a garden, map reading, storing and preserving food, reusing materials, animal care, plant knowledge, basic carpentry, vehicle mechanics, personal health and fitness. Why do I think this is important? I think it's important overall. A lot of this is like survival skills. just simple how to live.
Right. So we've actually forsaken, I think, what it takes to live for useless knowledge. And I say that because I look back, even those things that I found most useful in my younger years of upbringing, I had zero application. Look at your own life.
Right.
I think that where we've learned that knowledge that
Right.
sort of stuck with us is kind of on the job training. There are these work and these life experiences. It's those old mantras that, oh, I didn't do this at home because this is what mom or dad would make me to do. There may be good little things, lessons we learn along the way in our education, but I think we've got to really guard, and even us within our homeschool have to guard between what are we teaching? We got to fill this. Literally, the state requires us to do something similar to what the public school is doing in these 5 subjects. And, well, frankly, they're failing at what they're doing. They've got kids
They can't read.
That can't read, and they don't understand the finances, and they're working a cash register. And it's really a terrible circumstance, but we need to sort of build and thrive. I mean, I'm convicted that I know so little of our Constitution in America. This
that's a big
year
one for us
is a big one that we're going to focus on learning the Constitution. We're going to be able to recite. I think we should be able to recite a number of our amendments, if not all of them, and know a number of pertinent Supreme Court cases that interpret those for us. I mean, this is how you live and survive, and you prevent tyranny, and yet, so I don't need all this jargon. It's fun. We've been down that road where you memorize all the presidents. That doesn't help us. No. I mean, it can if we understand the principles, but know the Constitution, and so there's just things like that I think are important. But yeah, things that actually takes to survive.
And I think a lot of this, and I like this because I think this is foundational even to homesteading. Like a lot of this stuff you need on a daily basis to function in a homestead. You know what I mean? And so, and just a home in general, I believe. So, and I can make a list of this and put it out there.
Yeah, this is just a generic list. She's kind of looking at something from the Upcycled family. So they create some content that's pretty good at times. And what I would say, there's people that sometimes make the argument and say, well, what is that useful? Everyone's not going to be a homesteader, this, that, and the other.
Well, I'm going to get to that here in a minute.
Well, so here's what I want to say here is for one, you should be a homesteader. No, but here's the thing is, somebody is doing it. If you're not doing these things, you're relying on someone who is.
And we're going right into our next.
That's right. So all the goal setting, time management. If you're not a time manager, you will have someone manage your time for you. You will take a break when the buzzer goes off, and you will show up when they tell you to, because someone is having to manage that time. If you're not cooking and baking, you're relying on someone else to cook and bake for you. If you're not gardening, you're relying on someone else to garden for you. If you don't, all of those things. And so this is that same principle to, if you don't know these things, you're removing yourself further from that, and you necessarily suffer loss. Yes. We've talked about this before,
All right, so I've got a couple of resources that I am going to show you all. And I like how it goes right into what Vance was talking about, goes right into my next point. Okay? So even though you may not have an area to homestead, again, I think it's important to work on the skill sets that I mentioned, but I also think it's important to build some skill sets that are useful not only in everyday application, but maybe a way to earn money or barter. So understand, I believe, with homesteading, gardening products is just half of the view. Okay? Yeah. Having the skill set is what gets you there. what I'm trying to say is, if you have something, this is one of the books, Country Wisdom and Know How. It's full of different projects that you can complete, different skill sets you can learn. And I think people forget, material good is great. You can barter with it, but you can also barter with your skill sets.
Your knowledge.
Your knowledge. Right. And so, even if you don't have, again, the property, the land to do your gardening, or the money to have the ingredients to make the product, if you have that skill set and you have that knowledge, you can barter that out. So for the new year, I highly suggest that you pick something out that you want to learn about, that you want to a skill that you want to develop over the next year. And so again, Country Wisdom and Know How is a good one.
You got Stories Guide,
and I've got the Stories Basic Country Skills.
If you're on a farm, you'll notice the Stories name. That is a very good resource. They got Stories Guide to goats or to chickens or whatever. It's a really good resource. Stories is a good collection. Good number of books.
Well, and I mean we use these a number of times throughout the year.
Oh, sure.
Because you know what, we don't know everything. And so, I mean, clogged drains, it has about, basic house maintenance. So I highly suggest that these two books need to find their way into your personal library.
And listen, maybe you don't want to be a plumber, but plumbers are making, I don't know, $100 an hour now.
And they're few and far between, from my understanding.
So you, at the very least, you can avoid that several $100 charge by having a level of common sense, and so this is immediately beneficial.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? The thing that I like about this is that, so this book right here is $25. Okay. It may have gone up. It's been a while, but I think it's important to look for things that aren't going to cost you more money. I like making soap. I like making my products. But in the end, the best thing that's going to benefit me is to teach those skill sets, right? And that's where I'm moving into the 2024 year with the mindset of educating other people. I love my products. If you love my products, I'm going to continue to make them, although the price is going to go up slightly on those. But my prerogative is to teach other people. So there's two more resources that I highly suggest that you get. This one, if you have a homestead, this is the backyard homestead seasonal planner. What to do and when to do it. This will keep you focused on your tasks on your property. Again, it becomes overwhelming when you look out and you have things that need to get done. So understand, if you keep that list, so it tells you what to do in the spring or the months. It goes through the seasons. I'm sorry. So it tells you what to do in late winter. So guess what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking in here. So I guess, are we still considered early winter right now? I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean December, it doesn't start till December, so winter goes till March or something.
So it talks about early winter, midwinter, late winter, early spring, mid-spring, summer. And so it literally tells you when to do things.
When to address your pastures. When's a good time to begin, you got to get your compost on. You don't want to get it late. It would leave your soil hot.
Right.
You got to, so there's an order, so where it is helpful. Sometimes it's cleanup. So there's times of rest, right? All that.
And so this will keep you focused and in line with your homesteading. So another one. So when I'm gardening, every year I will get some different types of seeds to plant. Some that new varieties that I've never tried. I do that because I don't know, tomatoes are my big thing. I love growing tomatoes. Like, we have bukus of tomatoes every year, different plants.
I like eating tomatoes.
But I like seeing what varieties are going to do the best on my property, and those are the ones that I stick with. The ones that yield the best, the ones that are probably better for canning, more meaty. So my goal every year is to try some new varieties of seeds to see how they're going to do. This is a good resource, the Garden Journal Planner and Logbook. So you can keep track of what plants do well, where they do well, when you planted them, and just to keep a track and a record of what was successful and what wasn't successful, and it keeps you from wasting time and resources. So this is another good one to utilize. And the last thing, so I'm going to draw you back in. I know you're busy.
Go ahead.
But I think it's pertinent to talk about wisdom in the new year. And, God's guiding hands and what we believe to be important versus what God deems to be important.
Well, there is a number, if we think about the scriptures.
I'll do that here in a minute, Julie.
There are a number of scriptures that come to mind. A man plans his way, the Lord directs his steps. We want to be careful not to step out and be ambitious. We could think about really the term ambition carries such negative connotation for so long. Really, this is a new phenomena that ambition was considered a good thing. As humans, we were supposed to fit in to our design, into God's will, into the community that He's placed us in, to function within the family. And so there's a number of thoughts there. And yet we do lack wisdom. There's times where it's hard. Listen, it's hard to discern our times. It's hard to know where to start. I feel like for years, just our story, we have drowned in feeling like there's so much that we feel we ought to do, and we can't do it all. We don't have the time. We don't have the money. And things like that. And then now the Lord has brought us along. We've just realized that it wasn't about getting done. It was about being faithful. It was about just plugging away, because you got to live this life. You need to be a good steward of it. Redeem your time. And so we began doing that. We still at times feel overwhelmed we have projects. Now we have repair and upkeep of that which we've already implemented. We've got things that we have yet to implement. Things that we realize we're not it's not a finished project. We realize that we've got a checkpoint. We've done certain things, and we realize we've got the next year, several months to evaluate it and to see how we're going to need to change that in the future. So, and then we've got hobbies. Abram is interested in studying metallurgy, taking up blacksmithing. We've got us a little welder that we're eager to try out. And so there's projects there, but we're going to need new spaces for that. We're going to have some building projects that are important beyond the greenhouse. And so it all does feel overwhelming. It's not that we'll never get it done, but it's that we realize the work is the holy thing. We were called to work. And so the Lord blesses and gives the increase. But it's important to remember that we're also told, the one who lacks wisdom, let him ask of the Lord, who's gracious to give, and that
goes into, and so I'm doing a Bible study with a friend, and we're going over this Bible study.
You should flip that. I don't know if we can.
I can't. I don't know how to. I'm not smart. But this has been a phenomenal study so far. We're only on chapter 2, but Susan Heck is a faithful a faithful woman who is, I think, one of the only women who are being faithful to Scripture.
Listen,
and according to.
If you are a woman, women's ministry is a dumpster fire right now. And most of the time you're better off just finding a good study by Paul Washer or something. But there are, when the Lord is gracious in raising up women who can faithfully lead according to the Word, other women in submission, to their husband's faithful teaching. Our husband is a faithful teacher of God's Word. And so this is a good one.
This is a good one. And so the next chapter we're going over is wisdom. And, say yes to wisdom and no to wavering. And so I read through this chapter this morning, and the past month or so, I've been in awe of how, and I think we've talked about it before, just looking back on our life and seeing where God has driven us into certain areas. And although we didn't understand why we were going in that direction, and I look back and I think how clueless I was, going into homeschooling or going into, what we're doing here. It's it wasn't just by happenstance that these things happen.
Listen, everything, and I think there's wisdom in pushing back and not just being blown to and fro with every wind of doctrine.
And that's exactly what this is talking
about. Allow
about.
God to push you a little bit.
Right. And so this Bible study's in James, and it goes, I think sometimes we believe that we can't, it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And so, it's not only, I'm asking this question toward myself, but am I asking God for wisdom? Am I asking him, am I afraid of the answer when I say, give me more wisdom? Or, please show me where I'm lacking in faithfulness or what have you. And so, and not that, I'm fearful in that in any way, but sometimes I feel like I can't, not that it's a small thing, but I feel like there's so many larger issues going on. It's hard for me to go to God and say, give me wisdom. Because to me, it just seems, I don't know. We've talked about that at church before.
So you should pray with expectation, right?
With faithfulness,
With
right?
faithfulness.
Yeah.
Like this isn't just, I think people treat prayer as a superstitious thing. But go to God. Go to God. Know that you have the intercession of His Spirit and of His Son, and who is asking according to His will. And that when you ask wisdom, that He's likely to give it to you, and not just whimsically, not to follow the impressions of your heart. The Scriptures say elsewhere the human heart is a deceitful thing, but to seek the wisdom, accept the counsel of godly people around you. There's times,
and that it goes into that,
Right.
Well, but and two, we should seek that counsel, but I think we should always be seeking God's counsel first. We should be going to Him directly in prayer first, before, and I think, again, I don't want to undervalue the importance of fellowship with other believers. I'm not discounting that, but I think we automatically, instead of being still and trying to listen.
So, by way of transparency, I think it's best to just give an example. And sometimes, I've experienced this, that, sometimes I've been in mentorship, and recognize that, this person is telling me the way things ought to be, but I feel like I'm so far from that. I need a level of transparency. I need to know that they're real and that I'm real. And so examples of that are in getting a farm. So I wasn't raised on the farm, but my dad did get the farm. and I worked that, but the strong drive, like kind of like what you were talking about, to be on the farm, to raise children on the farm, to take that this step further, to grow that into a generational thing. And it seemed like, and we fought on this. The two of us fought, if you can believe it. We fought on this and said, well, why do we have to be on the farm? Why can't we just have the farm? Or this is such the financial undertaking, or all this burden and financial stress involved. And now we see what a rich investment it was. And so we did that. Now, I'm not saying that we did the best in seeking wisdom from God
Right.
or listening to counsel. I'm saying this is just where we learned that we should seek wisdom and listen to counsel. There were times in the building of this house, some of you may know, we went through a terrible trial, and bad contractors who held material hostage. We had liens filed, the whole 9 yards. And then there was listening. That was one area where I learned that, to listen to some of the counsel, not to just, I could seek God and say, oh Lord, help us through, and what should I do in this very terrible situation? But then I was confronted with her words, who had said, oh, God doesn't want us to have it in His heart. Well, that's not true. We're going to suffer trial. But she said, if God wanted to take it, you wouldn't give it up. Like, you're holding so tightly onto this. And I did. So I had to come out here in the middle of a storm, watching water pour in to our house during a rain because the roof was incomplete, and being left high and dry in the middle of a project, and to hit my knees and give it to God, and to say, Lord, this is yours. If you choose to give it back, we pray, we want to use it for your glory. We commit ourselves to that. That's been tested a time or three, but we've done it, and the Lord has blessed us and other people, I think, because of our home.
Well, but
and
I think I think it's not only, but it gives us that foundation that we need to listen to those convictions, right?
To slow back, yeah. Give yourself time to hear, be still, and know that He is God. Listen, seek time in His Word. Allow yourself time in prayer. The same was true. The same was true of ministry, of the strong call. I don't know, but I'm discerning the call. Am I called to a deaconship? Am I called to the pastorate? What am I called to? A wife that says, well, you can do what you want. I'm not a pastor's wife. And so we had to pray, and I prayed. We prayed, Lord, if this is what you'd have us to do, give me clarity, give me strength, give her clarity, give her resolve and rest, and change her convictions. And then it was actually when she came to me, it wasn't because she told me, oh, be a pastor, I want you to do this. But she came and said, you must do this. What that was to me was not me having to listen and do what my wife told me, but it was understanding the Lord has answered my prayer. He's drawn us together, and we knew that this was the direction He was moving our family. Same is true of homeschooling. And we're not homeschooling. You said, okay, well, we're not going to homeschool, but
well, I don't even think we understood why.
Yeah, we didn't understand. So we had to study. We had to study. Yeah. We had to pray. The Lord had to bring about certain other things that I think was good in the scheme of things. Like sometimes we talk about bad experiences, but we understand that it was the Lord. It wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing that it happened. So this is how God is sovereign, and He works all things in accordance with the counsel of His own will.
Well, and so my point being, I'm going to read James 1, verses 5 through 8, and I want you all to think about this going into the new year. Because I think there's been a lot of things that have distracted us, and it'll be more apparent when I'm talking about. But this is from James 1, 5, 8, and it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And so, I think this is clearly depicting a lot of people right now who are being tossed to and fro, who want to remain in the world and of the world, and not. And again, I'm talking to myself. As Christians, we have to guard ourselves from doubting God's promises, from doubting or thinking or devaluing His wisdom in our lives. When it's one of the most important things, Scripture tells us to ask for wisdom. And it goes on, to talk about King Solomon, and he could have asked for anything from God, but yet he asked wisdom, which is above any gold, silver, precious jewel, anything else. And so, going into the new year, not just set your goals and plan ahead, but ask for wisdom from God, because I believe that we're going to be heading in some turbulent times, and a lot of people are going to be, they are struggling. They're going to struggle. And so as believers and everything else, we have to be, our foundation needs to be on Scripture, on God, on Christ, and we know that with Him, the foundation will stand. So,
yeah, I would say absolutely. Understand what we're doing. It's not we're not putting on our capes and saving the world or anything else, but we do understand that God does give blessing, and we realize that if we were to speak theologically about the matter, when we say God is sovereign, we certainly, what everyone gets is that He has ordained the ends. He's established the end from the beginning. He knows it all. He brings it to its culmination. The final product is that which He first decreed. And I say that there's qualifications, so I don't think we have anybody that's going to over theologize that, because I could have just made a mistake in the way I expressed that. But it is, He is the first and the last, but understand God also sovereignly ordains the means. So what that essentially tells us is that He's not just to give us this destination of heaven. He's given us the whole path. Mm-hmm. The old Puritans would call this the pathways of grace. So we may go the way of the celestial city, thinking of Pilgrim's Progress, make it to heaven, but we must take the narrow gate, the narrow way. We must, it's not many paths, and so it's what we're understanding, the difficulty, the difficulties that homesteading, or that some of these things created, the difficulties in parenting your own children or discipling them, educating them, is difficult, but it's the difficulty that's going to produce the fruits in you as a parent. It's the difficulties on the farm that are going to produce the character in your children. It's always the difficulties. God has ordained the means as well as the end.
Well, it's refinement.
Right.
You've got to look at it as refinement.
Refinement, that's exactly right. But if you're talking about salvation, you evangelize people. God's going to save who He's going to save, I guess. But how is He going to save them? He's going to save them by the preaching of the gospel, by the ministry of the word. It's not so we don't neglect the means for the ends. God's given us all this. It's a life, and life more abundantly and free. So live to the fullest. You need Christ, not just for salvation. He's not an addendum to things that you do. We don't say, hey, homestead, do all this practical stuff that's actually going to help you, and just make sure you go to church on Sunday. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that glorify God in your gardening. When you're in the garden, understand now you have the opportunity to be connected. Take the shoes off. Be connected with the dirt from which you were made. Work it with your hands. By the sweat of your brow, and
It's
get
about
dominion.
changing the perspective. I'm guilty of this, looking at things, and I think you saw it this morning, but we tend to look at things as being hard or an obligation or just work, instead of joyfully and thankfully meditating on God, what He has provided, and the free gift of grace that we receive through Christ. I mean, it changes the complete aspect of everything when you change it from something hard to being a blessing from God, regardless of, maybe it is a trial, maybe it is persecution or what have you. But I mean, I think Scripture is clear at looking at it as a blessing that God has given us in refinement, in maturity, and ultimately relying on His wisdom.
You see these people sometimes, if you're a social media watcher, you've got like Instagram and all this stuff. You see these motivational speakers, and they talk about, hyping yourself up, and in every situation say, this is good, this is good. And then what's it accomplishing? It's good. Oh, it's harder. It's going to build my character. But listen, the Bible already speaks to these things. The Bible tells us that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. That means everything. I say this because people don't often push this to its end. When you run out of toilet paper, God is working it to good. How's He humbling you? How's He teaching you to prepare? That sounds funny, but push it to the extreme. Understand that God is caring for you actively, and that it is good. And so those difficulties are, in fact, good. So it is very important. All that refinement is necessary, and even whenever it's lasting difficulty, wouldn't you say that it's a good thing to submit to the discipline of the Lord, even if it's an area where He's disciplining our community or maybe even our family? He disciplines those He loves, and the discipline is a good thing, the right response. We see Israel rebel, the ancient Israel rebel, and the right response was to submit to the discipline. It wasn't to flee that which was difficult. It was to mourn that where they went wrong, where they sinned, and repent, and to allow God to discipline them, to endure the hardship, knowing that it would produce fruits in them. And so it's okay. It's like we had a wonderful conversation with family last night. Some of the Christmas fellowship and gathering, and we just had stopped by because there was family we didn't get to see, and so we took the opportunity to do so. But and it was a wonderful conversation, and Rachel, I think you were the one that said it, that our American culture makes us to believe that everything's got to be good, everything's got to be optimistic, that, well, it'll be okay in the end, or that it's always for the better. That can sound like what I'm saying right now, that there's always roses, or at the end of the story, do you always look for the happy ending? Where's the neat bow at the end of this story? But that's not life. Sometimes things fail. Sometimes things end. Sometimes, tragedy occurs. And so it's not about putting a smile on and thinking that better things should happen. It's about recognizing sometimes the right response. It's like when we come with brothers and sisters who are mourning, sometimes the right response is just to mourn with them, to cry and to say, oh, this is terrible. This is so terrible. And let's just entrust ourselves to the Lord in our anxiety, knowing that we don't know. We don't know if we'll come out of this okay. It's interesting because where the promises, all through Scripture, you can see this, where we've read in Scripture, if it's in the Gospels or if it's in the prophets or wherever we're at, but you'll you'll see this to where God will sustain you. There, He will preserve this remnant. But right before this, He say they will kill some.
Yeah.
Some of those He didn't preserve in such the way that they'll have life and have it more abundantly. Some of them died due to persecution and suffering.
And like she wrote in here about, the persecution. They were sawing them in half.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that God didn't preserve them.
Right.
That He didn't do good. But understand, this what we're saying is not, oh, things will be great. We're saying, entrust yourself to the Lord. Understand the means. The moment is important. It's not about where you're getting to at the end. Everyone says where the road's leading. The road is important.
We again value the persecution. Even the ones in Scripture. I think we don't look at that quite often, and I'm going to use an example because I think Joanne is a perfect example of somebody that has endured trial after trial, and to see her faithfulness, it encourages me to be a more faithful Christian. And so I can look at my trials and see, well, you know what? Enduring this trial is encouraging other believers around me to be faithful Christians because they see me enduring it and remaining faithful to God and relying on His will and His will alone. And so it's not only for our benefit that we are persevere during trials and tribulations and remain faithful to God, but it's an encouragement to those around us when we go through these things.
And this is the importance, I think, of the church fellowship. And I say it not the institutional church, but it is important. As we gather each Lord's Day, we find our people and we worship together. I'm the pastor there. I teach regularly. I study, and in our home we have these conversations on the daily. We have family worship in our home every day. But there is nothing that can replace going and gathering and worship with someone who's been a Christian longer than both of us have been alive together, and to learn from them, to allow their example in the faith. They've had someone who's come in and shepherded them to salvation, and they have maintained it. They've strove well through the trial. And Joanne's one, and there's another older brother. Yeah. He's one of the founding members of the church. Very simple. Doesn't get out much. Tries to stay close to the wood stove this time of year due to his extreme arthritis and the trial he goes through. But he's enduring. He's got all this cancer right now being taken off, and to hear him pray for himself, and this is so crazy because you would never think it's okay to pray this way, but to hear him at one point, I'd heard him pray that, Lord, I'm trusting you, give myself to you, and you're going to take care of it, and I believe that if it's your will, you'll get rid of this. It'll all take it out. And he said, because my faith is that strong, and I've never heard anyone say that. It sounds so different to hear somebody say, like, Lord, my faith is strong enough that you will do this. Like, there's not even a question that if it's your will, this is what you're going to do. And I almost laughed in the middle of our prayer time among our men because I knew it was true. His faith literally is that strong, and it's just that simple to him. And he has showcased it for all of these years. So there was no question. He was praying according to God's will.
That's the important part of church fellowship.
Yes.
And it's such a gift. Like, it's such a gift from God that so many deny themselves. And
let your children see those type of people.
Yes, absolutely.
Look, I can try to be an example as I may, but for him to have the relationships with those people is gold. That is.
But that's wisdom,
yes.
Right? That's wisdom.
Well, and there's a reason. I think that we're learning that as we slowly, gain the grays and things like that. The scriptures actually call those gray hairs wisdom. It actually calls the length of the beard the sign of the wisdom that embrace your age. And I've learned that as I grow older, my perspective, I'm more patient. I recognize this isn't going. We've got time, and I recognize the importance of raising my children to say, what do you think? Because this project is going to outlast me. I don't know if I'll get it right. How can I set you up to where you think you can get it right? Because if you don't get it right in your lifetime, how will your children? Will you enable your children to do so? And so we think generationally and
going into the new year.
So we want to wrap up, make the full circle, understand. Yes, set goals, not set goals. Keep yourself. There's a reason Christ is called the way. And that was actually what the early church was called, was the way. And set yourself in the way and take off and set a vision that has eternity in mind. So, because next year, all these other people, they set goals just so they can get fat and set the same goals. Those aren't any goals that I want. Right? I want to build. I want to build an empire. We had this, so perennials, so things that come back, so things that you can build on and grow, not that which you can do the same thing every year. It's just so repetitive and redundant, and it doesn't bear fruit. We want talents that reproduce, that grow, so that we have something to offer. Imagine the Lord coming back and to say, Lord, look at how I have stewarded the land you've given me, the home you've given me, the children you've given me, the family, the relationships you've given me, the ministry you've given me, the time you've given me, the jobs you've given me, the talents you've given me, the skills you've given me, the mind you've given me, and the strengths and the body you've given me. Look at all of these things, and I just want to give it back to you. We only get this one vessel, and so we do. Our body does matter, but let's build things that last. Christ sits on his throne right now. We're not waiting on him to do some profound thing or give us a sign. He's not waiting on us to accomplish some feat. He's reigning, and he's made us more than conquerors right now. And so the world, let them attack us and let us say, good, for our King reigns. Our treasures aren't even here. These are things that only manifest a love for what he's done and accomplished for us in all of eternity, because we get to enjoy these things forever. I mean, it's an eternal, it's an eternal consequence. Good morning, Doctor.
So
that's all I got.
Don't sow. Sorry that she keeps saying what you said.
Don't sow farts in the wind. That's good. Yeah, that's right.
She said that since you said it the first time.
Oh yeah. It's an old saying. I don't know if you've heard that. Don't be like a fart in the wind. You don't want to disappear. You want to hang around. You want to be like a fart in the shower. You know what I mean?
Stop it. Good grief. Okay. All right. So, set goals, look for wisdom, ask for wisdom. I will post those book suggestions, resources.
You might be able to make like an Amazon list or something. Just
I may. I'll try that. So, I hope you all rest up from Christmas. I'm going to try to do that today, perhaps. And I will see you next time. Or we will see you next time, right? Maybe.